Continuing our look through the evolution of the British Leyland model range, today we are looking at this brochure for the Specialist division, consisting of Jaguar, Rover and Triumph, dating from about 1978. Last week we looked at some Austin and Morris brochures from the same era, so if you're interested in having a look at that video first, please do. I'll put a card up in the corner. In the late 70s, things were not brilliant at BL. The company was nationalised following its bankruptcy a few years earlier, and it was pretty clear to everyone that immense rationalisation was necessary for BL to succeed long term. In the meantime though, a few had noticed that the constituent marques of British Leyland had lost their identity. They'd all been swallowed up by the empire and not much was left. Clearly, the marketing department had noticed this and issued a set of brochures like this one that include the traditional badges of the marques. For Jaguar and Rover, this wasn't a massive deal, but Triumphs through the 1970s rarely carried a badge, usually just the name Triumph next to a BL roundel. This change in marketing was most noticeable though in the volume division, where these two other circles were occupied by the traditional Austin and Morris badges. Those two marques were the ones most affected by the lack of identity in the 1970s. That idea of identity is mirrored inside. Character, as applied to motor cars, is a commodity which will always be in demand, increasingly so as it becomes harder and harder to find. We start of course with Jaguar, and their flagship is the wonderful XJS. Something I want to focus on with Jaguar is brand placement, and I'll get into why in a minute, but for the moment, the phrase Grand Touring Car has become grossly debased in recent years. Yet, for a fortunate few, the true concept of Grand Touring can still be experienced in the superb range of Jaguar cars. Now, diving into the range itself, we have the Jaguar XJ. This was and still is a wonderful car, a supreme balance between ride and handling in a way that only Jaguar could manage. Under the elegant body are some brilliant mechanicals. The suspension is double wishbones under the front and Jaguar's famous independent setup at the back with inboard disc brakes and available with a limited slip differential as an option. Making it go were the 3.4 and 4.2 litre XK 6-cylinder engines and the full-fat 5.3 litre V12. At its launch, I believe the XJ12 was the fastest four-door saloon car in the world. The original XJ was launched in 1968 and ran through until the early 90s, but the one we see here is the revised Series 2 that became available in 1975. Another new car for 1975 was the XJS, which both was and wasn't an E-Type replacement. If we go back to that paragraph about Jaguar's Grand Touring prowess, this is that car. In the late 70s, Jaguar had moved away from the sports car market and further towards GTs. That's what the XJS is. It's not a sports car like the E-Type was. I'm not the only one that thinks the XJS is getting better and better with age. It's maturing in a way that very few cars do. While a lot of people jumped on the bandwagon of, I don't like it because it's not an E-Type, many others saw that yet again Jaguar had produced a brilliant car that didn't shout about it. The XJS has presence, yes, but it's not flashy, not brash, just elegant. You know a design is good when you can recognise it instantly from a silhouette. That's the XJS. On the left we have all the specs for the Jaguars, then we move on to Daimler. Starting with the Daimler Sovereign and 66, both of which of course are badge engineered Jaguar XJs with a few touches that set them apart from their Jaguar counterparts. The 4.2 is from the larger engine XJ6 and the 66 gets the 5.3 litre unit from the XJ12. Now we have the Daimlers that are substantially different from the Jaguar XJ in the Daimler Van den Plas. Available again with the 6 or 12 pot engines, but finished by Van den Plas at Kingsbury. Just a quick note, it's pronounced Van den Plas, not Van den Pla. It's a name of Flemish origin therefore it's pronounced with the S. The only true Daimler exclusive is the Limousine, also known as the DS420, as it was based on the Jaguar 420G with a longer wheelbase and a different body. The Limousine led a very long life, and they're still occasionally used by royalty, dignitaries, generally heads of state. Even the richest of rich still probably wouldn't have a Daimler Limousine unless they were involved with the running of a country. These were built by Van den Plas themselves at Kingsbury in this period before their factory was closed by BL in 1979. The Limousine was just that. It had a dividing wall between the chauffeur and their very important passengers. If you're interested, here are all the specifications for the Daimlers. Now back down to something a little less luxurious and a lot more common, but ever so much cooler, the Rover SD1. Starting at the top of the range with the V8 powered Rover 3500, the SD1 replaced two separate cars, the Rover P6 and Triumph 2000, both of which were launched in 1963 and competed against each other. After the two companies were brought under the same roof, the decision was made to replace them with only one car. Rover and Triumph were sent away to come up with some proposals, and BL management chose Rover's design to go into production. It was nowhere near as advanced as the Rover P6, but it was engineered in such a way that it didn't really matter, as it still performed brilliantly. We have to remember that Rover had designed nothing but great cars for years and years before this. The 3.5 litre V8 was the same unit from the P6. The smaller straight-six engines in the 2600 and 2300 descended from the engines in the Triumph 2000, so there was a good deal of cooperation between the two firms in making the SD1 what it was. This car was a radical departure in terms of styling, strikingly modern at launch in 1976, firmly moving Rover out of its traditional comfort zone. Even the new skeletal-style Rover badge proved this departure. Unfortunately, as I'm sure we all know, build quality was pretty atrocious, and SD1s built up until the early 80s have a horrific reputation for going wrong. It's a great shame, as the SD1 was a belting car. The other Rover in this brochure is the Evergreen Range Rover. The original off-roader with saloon-style comfort, the best 4x4 by far. At this point, it's by no means a luxury car, that would come later, but it's the original and still the best. It was launched in 1970, so it was nearly a decade old at the time of this brochure, but it lasted until the mid-90s, and that's testament to the engineering of Spen King. Under the bonnet is the same V8 as the SD1, just detuned a little. The Land Rover, which is absent from this brochure, was a farm vehicle. The Range Rover had the ability to do everything, despite it still only being a two-door in this period. On the left are the specs for the Rovers, and then we move on to Triumph. While Rover took the large executive market, Triumph would take the small executive, something that Rover had never done, and the sports car market. Triumph were well established here with the TR range, though in the late 60s Rover had looked to join in with the P6BS, a mid-engine rear-drive V8 powered sports car based on the P6. Inevitably, that was cancelled almost immediately, and Triumph were allowed to do whatever they pleased with the sports cars. Triumph's small saloon was the Dolomite, which had a rather confusing development. It started in 1965 as the Triumph 1300, which was front-wheel drive, but the range was massively expanded over the years and reformed into the rear-drive Triumph Toledo to replace the little Triumph Herald in 1970. It was joined by the long-tailed Triumph Dolomite in 1972 as an upmarket variant. In 76, this was simplified with all models becoming Dolomites. The 1300 and 1500 over here retained the square headlamps of the Toledo, but gained the long tail of the Dolomite. The 1500 HL was much posher with its round headlamps, vinyl trim, silver steering wheel and additional gauges. And this being a Triumph, it has a wonderful classic interior. The Dolomite 1850 HL was more of the same with a bit more performance, a coach line and a front spoiler. The Dolomite Sprint was the original compact sporting saloon, competing with things like the BMW 2002 Tii. The Sprint had a 2-litre 16-valve engine producing just under 130 horsepower. It also had alloy wheels and a racing pedigree to match, winning the British Saloon Car Championship in 1975. The combination of great engineering, great spec and great styling, thanks to the pen of Giovanni Michelotti, made the Dolomite a brilliant car and, in my opinion, the best looking British saloon car of all time. Across the page is the little Triumph Spitfire, their small sports car that had been around for a number of years now. It still competed in-house with the MG Midget, but as a Triumph it was slightly posher. In every sense it was the classic British sports car, the kind that was fading away, as in 1975 Triumph introduced the TR7. This was one of BL's most controversial cars, along with the XJS, as it shocked everyone at launch with its radical styling. It was penned by Harris Mann, and he clearly loved his cheese, as this, along with the Princess, is very wedgy. To a lot of people, this was quite shocking. It was so modern and so different to everything else that people were polarised. This quickly turned into disappointment, as the TR7 only had a 4-cylinder engine compared to the straight 6 of the TR6, and it was only a coupe at launch. Underneath it was very conventional too. It was such a departure and remains such a radically styled car that a lot of people didn't like it and still don't like it. For me and a lot of others, this design is getting better with age. Later there would be a TR8 with the Rover V8 under the bonnet, but for now the normal 2-litre Triumph engine with an 8-valve head. Across the page, yet again, are the specs for the Triumph range. So there we are, a look at the Specialist division, and that should complete the BL range in the 1970s, but as I'm sure most of you are screaming, there's been a notable exception. This is a brochure for the MG range dating from 1979, and it's not included in either the volume or Specialist divisions. Why? Well, MG was originally an offshoot of Morris, so it should belong in the volume division, but it was instead shoved into the Specialist. It was never a fully fledged member though, as this division was always known as Jaguar Rover Triumph, but according to the address on the back of this brochure, it is in the Specialist division. I'm not going to go through this brochure now, as I've already done a video of it. I'll put a card in the corner if you'd like to see it. So with those Austin and Morris brochures from last week, and these two today, that's how the British Leyland range looked through the 1970s. In the next one, we'll be heading into the 80s, by which point Michael Edwards had fundamentally shook up the firm with his product-led recovery. For now though, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please do click like and subscribe to TwinCam as well. I'll have more videos coming along soon.